Hello, and welcome back to Avon Talks. My name is Ethan Guo. Following victory in World War II, the United States was forced to navigate a precarious transition period as it welcomed its millions of veterans back into society. To accommodate many of these returning soldiers and the subsequent baby boom that followed, developers across the country found success in creating standardized suburban housing and lifestyles that heralded an extreme period of national uniformity in the 1950s. However, American life would not stay stagnant for long. By the 1960s, the hippie movement fought against this uniformity for an era of creative expression and individualism, amongst other goals, like never before. Avon would feel the results of these efforts as it welcomed the Farmington Valley Art Center in 1974. Joining us to discuss the visionary history of the center and its impact on Avon and Valley life are Carol Kaplan, the current executive director of the center, and Melissa Meredith, a current member of the board of directors. Thank you so much for being here with us. Could you tell me just a little bit about how the Farmington Valley Art Center got started in Avon?
Sure. So I'll take you back to the 60s. And the Central Baptist Church had a proposal in 1966 for a detached ministry. And they wanted to just kind of break out from the church and bring the church to the people, I guess is kind of a good way to describe it. But their model pretty much was they wanted to connect with workers and shoppers away from the church somewhere. Originally, they were going to do this. They wanted to do it on Pratt Street in Hartford, and they wanted to have a building with a ground level coffee shop and a bookshop. Second floor, art studio and gallery, and third floor was offices for counseling and referral services. The plan was the whole thing was developed, but it was not funded because of budget cuts. So the plan sort of, lay on a shelf for 10 years. And Mr. Norman Towler dusted it off and said, let's look at this plan again. I think the time is right. He looked at it, talked to the church powers that be, and said, is it, we've kind of looked around and revisited this, and it's really expensive to rent property in Hartford. Do we have to stay in Hartford? And they said, no, you can. Initially it was going to be that way for whatever reason, but they said, no, you can just, you can branch out and go somewhere else. So he just kind of just started looking around, like you would read the real estate ads or something, and see what's out there. And it was a place called the Talcott Mountain Group or something. And turns out it was, there were two buildings for sale in Avon Park North, which are currently the Art Center buildings. And they presented the idea to the leasing agent, whose name was Stanley Fisher. Stanley Fisher is a big name in the Avon area. He donated fields, and he was on board with this idea. And he said, do you have a plan, and what's your budget? And they went through all the steps. Let's see if we can make it happen. And they said at the core of this is, having studio artists have a place to make and have them making so that the community can see them and see art in the process. Because that's, and have the other things as well. But, here we have these two buildings that are perfect. And this will be where the artists are. And over here will be where the office and the gallery would be. And so they came with the idea. They came with like $10,000 or $12,000 in the budget to do all of this, which is wild. And Stanley Fisher brokered the deal and was an active voice in the whole process. So it was kind of the combination of just a forward-thinking and funded church group. And then a developer who also didn't say, oh, no, that's a silly idea. What are you thinking? He said, yeah, you know what? Let's figure out how we can make this work. And then, the ripple effect and the feelers. And then the artists who said, oh, we're going to be doing this thing. And the artists, as artists are wont to do, said, yeah, pick me.
I did want to add to what you were talking about. You said it's the 60s, and that was a wonderful time, I think, for people embracing new things. It was sort of a a revolutionary time politically. And I think that's what would have brought out exactly what you were talking about and why something like the Art Center could have taken place.
Yeah, I mean, the 60s moving forward was right before the hippie movement, which was huge. And obviously, a lot of self-expression was huge on the minds of young people. I sort of wonder then.
I was one, so.
I sort of wonder then, like, in this period, though, in the entire Farmington Valley, I guess, was there like this want for more self-expression in alignment with, I guess, this national mood, or what was that process like?
I think there just became more of a validity to having a career as an artist,
I see,
as a sculptor, as a craftsman. That became something you really could do, and for once, actually make, particularly for women, I think, a living at it.
I see.
Which was wonderful.
One of the things that that I stumbled upon, I'm going to be the history nerd here, but it's fascinating once you start reading about it, because we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, and that's a huge thing that we are very proud to celebrate. Is that there was not a lot of space that was available for artists to rent, and I think that was the big draw. I mean, in this area, there still are to this day just tons of creatives around, and no place to find studios. So that's why I think it was in 1972 they had all the studios filled, and they were starting. This was percolating in the early 70s, and I think the 70s too was also a time. There are a lot of places that are celebrating 50th anniversaries that are creative. I mean, and I think the Avon Historical Society is also celebrating 50th anniversary. But, places for gathering, places for connection, places for creating, for recording history, for, I mean, it was just like, that was the vibe, I think. That was the vibe of the 70s.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I guess moving back to the foundational part, once they settled in Avon, obviously they chose a building that used to be it used to belong to the Climax Fuse factory, which made dynamite, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember when I toured the studio with you guys were talking a little bit about how this old architectural design that was, very practical for a dynamite factory, how that has sort of also worked its way into current design of the art studio. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and what the process of modernizing it and remodeling it to fit the needs of the art studio has been like since the 1960s and 1970s.
Well, the studios are pretty much the same.
Oh, really?
That's the one building. Is 22 spaces that are equal in size, of around 525 square feet. And so that has remained unchanged. But the changes really, and Melissa, you can speak better to this, would be Fisher Gallery, because that's seen some changes over time.
Remember, I think I mentioned that belonged to a printmaking advertising agency. That whole building was added, and that's where Fisher Gallery came.
Were there 2 floors in that building?
No.
Originally, just one? Okay.
Just one, yeah.
There's the old Fuse building, and then there's another building that's now Fisher Gallery.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, both were part of the factory. So there are several buildings in the brownstone area, which is right behind Town Hall in Avon, in the police department. And so there's a whole, just the older part, or the brownstone buildings. And so several buildings were all part of that. But it was a factory, but it was a factory with a lot of green space, which again was pretty revolutionary, because it wasn't just like, let's just cram these workers in a beautiful place to work.
Right.
Whether you're a factory worker or an artist.
And there were loads of factory people's homes right around that area.
Right.
That have now been...
That were built by the company for the workers. Yeah.
I know you guys talked about how the art center was very well received. By very well received, did you mean all of the Farmington Valley, all of Connecticut, or was it mostly the Avon area where it just settled? I know it's right behind the town hall, or like the town center, so there's that sort of visibility just moving in, but I was sort of wondering, what was that process like?
I think it was extraordinary how welcomed we were, not only by Avon, but my goodness, from West Hartford, Bloomfield,
I see.
all of Canton, all of the surrounding towns, because it was a visionary idea to have all these artists in one spot, and people would come, which was wonderful. And then other wonderful things were added.
That kind of makes me wonder, how accurate of a designation do you think Farmington Valley Art Center is for the center then? Or does it stretch way beyond what the Farmington Valley is, in your opinion?
Complicated question.
It's too bad. It kind of confuses people.
It is confusing, and I think the Farmington Valley is it's the valley by the river, which includes 5 towns, except then there are other towns that are sort of part of it, but not named, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the Farmington River is the thing that defines it. But as far as reach, I mean, we connect with Greater Hartford and over the mountain and across the river and through the woods.
So I guess Farmington Valley is the home of the center, but the center is for all of Connecticut, if not beyond that.
For sure.
I see. We talked, I think, very abstractly about the foundation of it, like the mission behind it. But I guess what was the art center like in its early days? Obviously, you mentioned how, people all around Connecticut, Greater Hartford area flocked to the art center, but what were they, I guess, doing there? What was their primary function?
I think there were some people of the studio artists who wanted it to be a very inclusive, altogether idea of all the studios, which would benefit us, the studio artists, and the public. And we kind of made rules for each studio, which it was, a regulation that we agreed to be open on Saturdays, almost all the months of the year, not just once a month. We had our own little president, the Studios Association and that sort of thing. It was a very cohesive group. Less so now. Perhaps the need isn't really there any longer. But it was a nice group. You were part of it. To be part of. And it was we all got along so incredibly well, which I think, again, a group like that, varied ideas and professions, but it was very helpful to each other. My moving my equipment in was done by the other men there, which was, I think, just so incredible to me to even remember that.
I think being part of an idea and a concept and a happening, it's exciting. And it's exciting for artists in particular, I think, because of just the whole creativity of it. And so you're like, hey, we're building this new thing, let's put on a show. And I think that energy is something that it seems like, I wasn't there quite yet, but it seems like it was infectious.
And I think that goes on till today. There are so many people who come and go, oh my heavens, it's here, it's wonderful, and they get so excited, which is just such a blessing.
One of the things, if I could just add this to, I just thought of it, there would be concerts on the lawn.
Oh, really?
At lunchtime. And so it wasn't just like, artists in there, but it was, so it would be happening. So people from the whole community would be like, let's pop over to the Art Center's lawn because there's going to be some free music. We'll have a sandwich at the picnic table. And so that whole vibe was something that was people wanted to be part of.
Right.
What kind of concerts would they be? Would they be like rock or indie or whatnot?
I don't think indie was a term yet.
No.
It was more along indie. It was folk singers probably.
I see.
And a couple, just a couple of people who would maybe come and play.
Might even be one guitarist.
Fiddle or
I see. Is there any particular concert that you guys remember more vividly, or I guess even anything along these lines? Doesn't have to be concerts.
There's a very unusual, I don't think if it's in the any of the history, Caravanserai, and that included a big concert. Jerry Alexander, one of the early people, the glass blower maker, he was upstairs. organized it.
Mhm.
And it was an amazing event that a lot of people came to for the music, but also for what happened in it. He brought in, I don't know how it happened, he got this to happen, but animals,
I see.
camels, and all kinds of things. And it was like,
It's amazing.
was
Oh my gosh. Are there any pictures?
We have to do that again.
Yes. I mean, people say it's a circus there, so let's do it.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I have not run across any pictures of that.
Gosh,
I know.
and even remembering the title of it was, there were posters for it. It was a wonderful event. So,
Oh my gosh. Sounds amazing.
Talking about the community and everything, how did you guys personally choose to join the art center, and what was it that drew you guys to it?
Well, for me, in the 70s, late 70s, I went there in 1977. I just finished being in Brooklyn. I had an illustration job, and I just graduated from Pratt. I came home to find, oh, this is horrible. There's nothing here. And then when I found out, a friend, one of the original artists, Marion Wallace, who was a sculptor on the second floor with Jan Bennett, somehow got it to my grandmother that there was openings in Avon. Went to look at them, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is heaven. It was an upstairs studio that I was able to have, and I'm only the second one in it. Ed Mitchell, a photographer, was in. He's still
That's wild. Oh, is he?
Still. So yes, that's how what got me there.
And what specific art style do you specialize in, or are you most fond of doing, I guess?
I went there, and I told you about that heavy equipment coming up. That was my big press arrived. I'm a printmaker.
I see.
I am a printmaker.
Yeah, you are. At your core.
Yes, I am. And that's what I did there. And it was nice because there wasn't another one at that time. Another one had left. I still don't know anything about her. But anyway.
I have names. I wrote them down.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I think that's where the counterfeiting came from.
Another story for another time.
Yes, I know.
That'll be the second part of the podcast.
Okay. Yes.
Stay tuned for the counterfeiter. Dun, 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 dun.
And apparently the robbery that you guys are talking about.
That too. That's right.
But what about you? How did you get involved?
So I've had many careers, and so I went back to get my teaching degree when I was about 50 years old. And so graduated from there, and it was a 4-year program, and I said, what am I going to do now? And it was a similar sort of a trajectory, except I wasn't in my 20s. And so I had some friends who, the 4 of us had gone through the program at CCSU to get our teaching degrees. And so someone said, oh, there's a place, probably was Avis, I'm thinking, right? There's a place in Avon, and they have studios there. So we're like, let's go do that. So, and there were 4 of us, which was a little bit insane because there's a jury process.
I see. So
it's harder to get 4 people in, I would think, or we'd have to be like, oh, sorry, sorry, Melissa, you didn't make it, and I did, So the 4 of us moved into the studio. That was my first go around, and that was in 2008.
I see.
Yeah.
And what is your specialty?
I do mixed media, found objects, collage.
I think, Melissa, you were talking about this earlier, but you were talking about how in the earlier days, you guys sort of really got a group started, and part of this group was getting the all the roles straightened out, having your own president, having your own board, etc. I was wondering, at this point, was it starting to separate officially from the church that had founded it in the beginning, or what was that process like?
Church is long gone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Way
long gone.
I didn't even know about it then.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember I wrote down a note in the beginning when you guys were talking about the founding with the pastors and the church about whether or not any of those ideas still stuck with the art center, but I'm assuming completely gone.
I think community, I mean, when they were first looking at opening up the first go-around, it said in these notes that really, they are fascinating. They wanted to open up a 3-story building on Pratt Street in Hartford. And this was before they found the art center and possibility. And they wanted to have a coffee shop on the ground floor. And then they wanted to have an art gallery and art studios on the 2nd floor. And on the 3rd floor, there would be referrals and counseling. It's a very contemporary model. It's a mixed-use space, right? So I think all of that, from what my interpretation would be, is community and keeping people, healthy and together and supported.
I would have loved it if there was a coffee shop there.
I mean, yeah.
There are enough.
We need one there now.
Yes, we do.
I guess that kind of follows into this next part, because obviously, as the center was started, a lot of artists flood into it. Flood? I don't know. Went there and
flood, and then maybe fled.
We had those.
A lot of artists went there, but I was wondering, what was the process for the rest of the community? How did the art center, I guess, deal with the rest of the community? Maybe through programming. What kind of stuff did you guys do in that area?
Classes, workshops, events. We have annual events
The
that
concerts.
we've done for 45 years. The concerts, not quite as much, but dabbling a little bit. But we have over 60 classes every season.
I see.
3-year-olds to 93-year-olds. And we have annual events like Candlelight, which we've been doing a holiday stroll for over 45 years. And we've been developing other things depending on where we are in the process. We have, Friday night studios that we do. Just, if there's a good idea that comes along and it fits within our mission, then we're like, all right, let's do it.
And Carol has been very good at implementing these new things. And many of them just by chance, and they've worked. And she's set them up, and it's worked beautifully.
But I think it's one of those things, and I remember a very wise person when I took on this role said, I met with him. He's on another board that I serve on, and I invited Pat to come over, and I said, I don't have any idea what I'm going to be doing in this job. I need your help. You've done this for a lot. And he basically said, bottom line, does it connect to the mission? It's like, because there are things like you can do, let's have, beer tasting, let's have this. Yes, you can do that kind of stuff, but at the core, how does it connect to the mission? And so that's the question I ask myself, and I feel like that's the through line that makes sense. I mean, we're a nonprofit organization, and you have to fulfill your mission. I mean, there's a responsibility.
Yeah, you didn't really want to dilute it with a bunch of random stuff just for the sake of it.
And you want to continue having your nonprofit status.
That too. That helps, yeah.
It's not like they check for licensing, but it's just, I think at the core,
exactly.
What are we doing here? And does this connect to who we are and what we do?
I know when we were talking about the founding, you talked about how a lot of these other organizations also, like these art organizations, also sprung up in the 60s, 70s, the creative organizations. I was wondering, does the Art Center do any programming with these organizations across state or across the towns? Is that a thing that you're looking into?
We have connections. I'm sort of thinking like with the Avon Historical Society. I'll just use that as our example here, where it's something that something will come my way, or I'll see that something's happening, or we have an artist that has a show at another gallery, or an artist who's teaching somewhere else. And authentic connections has ended up being the thing that has made us stronger and more diverse and more interesting, I think. Rather than, it's sort of like one of those things where, we're celebrating anniversary. Oh, I see the Historical Society is too. Oh, I see there's this podcast. And it's one of those things that just, because again, it just makes sense.
It does.
And rather than, hey, although I do like the circus idea. I was going to say, hey, let's put on a show, but we do that too.
I'll never forget it.
I know. I need to get that.
It
the
would
name
be
of
a
that.
doable thing.
Yeah.
It really.
Yeah.
Talk about drawing people. My goodness. And also on the surrounding art organizations, happily we are rather large with all the studios and the spaces we have. And unfortunately, I don't think the other ones connect that well with each other or us anyway. I think they're all kind of separate entities, don't you?
That's it. I would agree with that, except for during the pandemic.
Yes.
That was a game changer.
That's
where
true.
somebody, one of our people, a friend, she's become a friend from the Greater Hartford Arts Council. And part of what they were doing is trying to figure out how do you connect with people during these challenging times. So we met twice a month virtually.
Oh, good.
And it was not, the big guys like the Wadsworth. It was small to medium-sized organizations. And it basically was just a, hey, what are you guys doing during this? And it became something that forged a bond where we now all, and we were all like, executive directors or board chairs or something. And now it's like, oh, so-and-so is doing this. Windsor Arts Center is having this opening. Oh, look, it's our artist in residence who's in the show.
Yeah.
I mean, it made a connection that I don't think we would not have had without the pandemic, honestly. And that, again, is something that is valuable and we grow going forward.
Very valuable. Yes.
And feeling supported, not like, I'm out here all by myself.
No.
Which, is a nonprofit world kind of thing too,
right.
for many reasons. But also, we have lots of stuff going on in our pod, and you can kind of hang out in your pod,
right.
but it's not as interesting if you
don't reach out.
If you don't reach out,
you're right.
For sure. We've talked a lot about different organizations or different projects, different whatever enterprises that the Art Center has taken on since its founding. I was wondering, Carol, you highlighted this in specific, but the idea of the mission, and are these new projects staying true to the mission, etc. With this sort of continuity in the mission, what aspects of the Art Center have changed since its founding, or do you believe that a lot of it has really stayed pretty stagnant or stayed the same throughout?
I think I would use the word stable. I think it's a strong foundation that has enabled us to then branch out in ways that make sense to the foundation. I mean, it's a pretty clear, and Melissa's been on the board for many years. I was served on the board with her as well. And
I do everything for many years.
Which is amazing. Stable. And it's, I think, creatives, we're not afraid of a challenge, and we're also nimble and in a smaller organization. And so if you just kind of keep the through line, and then when someone says, hey, how about this? Does that make sense? And I'm like, well, let's read the mission statement and see, but still, does it make sense?
Carol has embraced what she's talking about to an amazing extent. And I will say, yes, there's been a big change in some of the direction, and it's probably the most wonderful and valuable one to the community especially, which are the classes. And to think we've gone to adults of every age, and to then teens, elementary school kids, and tiny people. It's like,
tiny
oh my God. And Carol has implemented all of this. And it's become, I would say, a huge part and a wonderful part, because that's what art is. It's giving to everyone at all ages. So she really did do that.
It's someone who was telling me this, I think a board member, was like lifetime customer value or something, where you have, if you have and this is I think one of the most wonderful things about the Art Center. So you have the parent who came to the Art Center as a kid and took a class, who's bringing their kid to the Art Center to take a class. And then the grandmother is picking up the kid who also took a class. I mean, it's like a very sustainable.
Exactly.
You're building the farm team, so you have the parent, and then you have the kids, and then they're just going to stay and continue through. And that's, I mean, a sustainable model. That's
and this
pretty
is the
sustainable.
value of creativity.
Yeah.
And in life, and there's hardly anything more important for going forward than that.
And it doesn't matter who you are. And I experienced this when I went back to school at an advanced age. I mean, I was hanging out with the 20-year-old guys who just graduated from high school. And it was because we had a shared a shared interest, and it had nothing to do with, what age I was, who I was, what I looked like. It was just like,
Right.
that was the commonality is powerful and palpable.
I think part of this foundation, though, that you guys were talking about, at least my understanding, is still at the end of the day, the artists actually at the center. And I guess expanding on that it's the artists in residence who, are working in the studios, a lot of whom who are teaching these classes and, really doing the groundwork that's keeping the center running. And I was wondering, obviously, the artist in residence program has been, I guess, the foundation since its founding, but I was wondering how that might have also changed throughout time. Melissa, you talked about diversity and how the center really draws from a wide base of people ranging from professions and experience. But I was wondering, I guess just from a starting point, what kind of artists are the ones that are really being drawn to the Farmington Valley Art Center? Are they, for example, mostly trained or professional artists, or what is this combination like at the center?
I would say that there are perhaps fewer professional artists, only because they, I think, have found many of the wonderful spaces now in Hartford. There are just fewer, I don't know, professionals. I think they're more, and I don't mean, I'm talking about professional artists or professional craftspeople. We have an incredible new woodworker, Carol's work, and oh my goodness, your husband's work is incredible. It's differing than it was in the beginning. I think there were a lot of painters and like, I don't know, me, a printmaker, Maureen was in fabric. The earlier people, I think, on the glass, Jerry Alexander. But I think it's changed a little bit that way, but it's just as wonderful. It's just a little bit different.
I think lines have blurred.
Yes.
It used to be, it would be like fine art and craft.
Yes.
I see.
And the lines have
There is
blurred, and
completely.
that, I think,
Completely.
is who we are.
Yeah.
And high quality
Very.
is, that's and a passion and a dedication to what we do and what we make.
Yeah, I mean, I asked this question also because, as times change, as people change, a lot of new mediums are coming around, a lot of new ideas are coming around. So I was wondering how the art center, I guess, is dealing with this. What new mediums have you guys seen that you guys found particularly, I guess, compelling to the both of you as you guys?
I don't quite know how to answer that. My first thought when you were talking about that, I was thinking of all the changes with computers and art and art copies, all the things that have changed over time because of what's happened with AI. I do think it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
But I don't think real creativity, real art can be replicated ever.
Agreed.
I really mean that. As hard as they might try, or Elon Musk might try, it's not going to happen. It just isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I answered that, and I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
You did, though. You backed into it, Melissa.
That's the way I drive.
We have an artist who actually he is a storyteller. So his paintbrush is a computer and is a microphone and tells compelling stories. In documentary form, and it may look different than what we're doing, and it's a little closer to maybe what you're talking about, but we're telling stories in what we do, and he's telling a story but using a different medium.
Right.
I guess that the point about I was trying to make with that is obviously when I learned art for a little bit, I started with sketching and then eventually moved on to acrylic for painting and then moved on to oil painting and whatnot. but it was like very classical. It was like sculpting. I started with drawing circles and then like doing still life, etc., and then moved on to replicating things. But for me, when I think about art now, and when you go to museums, especially a lot of modern art museums, I don't know what your thoughts are on those, but a lot of those is, they make use of a lot of different mediums. For example, like video, like documentaries. I know my school, the art center, like the art exhibit recently just did one where a lot of it was sculptures, but with a lot of different for example, it wasn't like the traditional classical sculptures. It wasn't trying to strive for realism. It was trying to implement all these different kinds of things. I was wondering, is this something that maybe the Farmington Valley Art Center is striving towards, or is it something that is what's the trajectory on, I guess, this kind of innovation in art?
I think things change, and I think that, and I think I sort of touched on this before, but creative people always have an open mind to seeing, what is this? What's it going to look like? I mean, because you think of over history, like, oh, well, we're drawing like this, and then someone says, oh, this is what perspective is. You're going to be like, oh, no, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But that's, it is, like we're talking about AI and, we know about it. So then we're looking at creatively, okay, so what does that mean? And how do we deal with it? And it's out there. I think classical training to me is important. I mean, it's the part of the foundation, the building blocks, but different people learn things differently and can access them in a different way based on their own personal life experience.
Right.
And so that's going to look different for everybody.
It is. And I think the building blocks in art are necessary. It's unfortunate that they are, but it's kind of like learning how to read or speak.
Yeah.
That beginning.
Or dance.
Yes.
Or
you can
play
go
an
off
instrument.
from that after. You don't even have to have a good way of reading or speaking. As long as you have part of one, then you can leave that and go into, I think, any kind of beautiful abstract, because once you know what beauty is in the blocks, like composition or design, you know it, and it appears in the abstract or anywhere else. So
yeah, and there's a whole intuitive piece, and there's some people who are just more intuitive than others, and that's a bigger piece of the whole thing. But I think just having, again, the basics, you're saying, oh, I don't know why that looks good. Oh, because, it's the rule of thirds and, or whatever other example is, so I think that's, and then if that becomes then intuitive because you just then are doing it.
And then when it isn't appearing in a piece, you know it immediately. It's like, uh-oh, it's off. And
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I mean, especially the part Melissa was talking about the foundations. I was just thinking about English. I'm an English major in college, and one of the things I've always been thinking about is how flexible of a language it is. Poetry, for example, can be incredibly abstract, but once you get the basis of the language, you can make really beautiful phrases, really beautiful poetry, just by twisting and forcing the language to work in different ways. And I think that's sort of what you guys are touching towards.
It's like, oh my gosh,
that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
It came right to my head when you started that. You're right.
Yep.
I mean, I think we're nearing the end of this. I think we've covered a lot of good ground. Maybe in the next part we can talk more about the specific anecdotes that you guys are talking about in relation to the robberies.
That's part 2.
Yeah, but
Maybe not. I don't know.
We'll have to subscribe though. $6.99 a month.
But I guess moving forward, what are some future plans that the Art Center is hoping to embark on? And I guess how do you see the Art Center shifting to match the needs of the Valley that is also, I think, changing very drastically within these past few years?
some big changes
Mm-hmm.
might be coming. She knows about it.
Are you going to get a first leak of these changes?
Subscribe. We talked about this, Ethan. So just a little bit of a backtrack. In 2009, we had a recession that hit Connecticut and the country hard, and in particular, we had a whole nother mini recession within that recession. Yeah. The art center we had to close our doors for like a day.
Yeah.
And it was huge because it was like, we're not sending your kids to classes or art camp, or we don't have, extra money for X, Y, and Z. And that was something that was sobering, and we had to restructure and look at, it's not unlike the pandemic. So in a way we were weirdly prepared on one level. But I think that was something that we've been working hard to recover from. And I feel very positive about the direction that we're heading, and hopeful and excited, because it takes a long time to climb out of that kind of a situation. But everyone banded together, and we're like, no, we're still doing this. I mean, it may not look pretty doing it. We may have a leaky roof here and there, because but we're here, and it's an amazing place that we've built together. I mean, that's the thing.
Right.
There are a lot of people in our community.
Yeah.
A lot of places have classes. A lot of places have galleries. Not a lot of places have 17 artist studios with 20 artists. I mean, that's a community. So
right.
I feel like we're now in a spot where it's sort of, the analogy of, put the oxygen mask on the mom, and then so we've gotten to a place of strength.
Definitely.
And coming out of the pandemic as well, and a couple of fallen trees on our buildings, So we do have some big plans for the future, which I'm not at liberty to share yet.
And they're big. They're really big.
But on mission, connected to the mission, just, who we are and what we've done. And looking back at what we started off as, you look at the list. When I looked at that list and I wrote it down this morning of the original artists who were there, to a person, you could match them up to who's at the art center now. There were 2 potters. There was, 2 furniture makers. There were, it was like, and 1 printmaker. And she's still with us, which is the best.
This podcast is an Avon Historical Society production, edited by me, Ethan Guo. Special thanks to Priscilla Marshall for the graphics. If you'd like to support this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever else podcasts are downloaded. Want to be featured on a future episode or stay up to date with the podcast newsletter? Feel free to reach out to us at avontalksahs@gmail.com. For more on the Avon Historical Society, visit www.avonhistoricalsociety.org.